No one expects their life to change because of a rainstorm, a broken bus, and a ruined interview. But Anna Clenn didn't have the luxury of hope that day. Soaked, shivering, and covered in mud, she only wanted a fair shot at a better future. She never imagined that behind the polished glass doors, a man like Gerald Bones, cold, powerful, and untouchable, would see her, choose her, and unknowingly change both of their lives forever. Some chances come wrapped in disaster, and some hearts are unlocked by the ones who dare to show up when everything falls apart. Before we dive into the story, comment below where you're watching from. Enjoy the story, everyone. The rain had been falling since before dawn, a steady, punishing torrent that blurred the city into a shapeless gray. Anna Clenn hunched inside her worn-out jacket, clutching the strap of her canvas bag as she splashed through puddles that swallowed the sidewalks whole. She had left the shelter at first light, armed with nothing but determination, a hastily printed resume, and a fragile hope that today might be the day everything changed. Her sneakers squelched miserably with every step. The bus she had managed to catch broke down 2 blocks from her destination, a gleaming skyscraper that rose arrogantly above the flooded streets. Whitestone Tower. The place that, according to a crumpled flyer on the shelter bulletin board, was hosting open interviews for administrative staff. No experience necessary. Just show up. Anna had shown up. But not like this. A passing delivery truck hit a deep puddle with a roar, sending a tidal wave of filthy water crashing over her. She gasped, stumbling back, her jeans clinging to her legs, her thin blouse plastered against her skin. Mud streaked her arms and face. For a long moment, she just stood there, the world spinning around her as cold rivulets dripped from her hair and jacket. No one stopped. No one asked if she was okay. She bit the inside of her cheek hard enough to taste blood. Giving up wasn't an option. Not anymore. If she turned around now, she'd be admitting that she didn't belong, that she was too broken, too far gone to even try. And she couldn't let herself believe that. Head down, she pushed through the revolving doors into the lobby. Warmth hit her like a slap. The scent of coffee and polished wood filled her lungs. Men and women in tailored suits swept past without a glance, their shoes clicking sharply against the marble floor. Anna caught her reflection in a towering mirror and winced. She looked exactly like what she was, a girl from nowhere, soaked to the bone, standing awkwardly in a place built for the powerful. The receptionist behind the curved marble desk raised an eyebrow so sharp it could have sliced glass. "Can I help you?" she asked, voice dripping with disdain. Anna tightened her grip on the strap of her bag. "I'm here for the interviews." The receptionist's gaze flicked over her, unimpressed. She tapped something into her tablet with perfectly manicured fingers, then motioned toward the bank of elevators. 37th floor. Anna mumbled a thank you and hurried across the lobby, her wet sneakers squeaking embarrassingly with every step. Heads turned. Someone laughed under their breath. Her face burned hotter than the building's designer lighting. The elevator ride felt endless. She wiped her hands on her jacket, trying to make herself look halfway presentable, but there was only so much she could do. The mud was drying in crusty patches on her jeans. Her hair clung in damp snarls around her face. When the doors slid open, she found herself facing a sleek waiting area crowded with neatly dressed candidates. Everyone else looked perfect, pressed suits, glossy portfolios, calm, confident smiles. A few glanced up as she stepped off the elevator. Conversations faltered. Whispers flitted through the air like knives. Anna squared her shoulders and approached the sign-in table where a bored-looking assistant handed her a clipboard without a word. Her fingers trembled slightly as she filled in her name. She was painfully aware of the mud drying on her arms, the ruined state of her shoes, the fact that she was dripping onto the expensive carpet. "Miss Clenn," a voice called. Anna's head snapped up. A woman in a crisp navy dress stood by the conference room doors, holding a clipboard. "Yes," Anna croaked. "Follow me." Murmurs followed her down the hall like a shadow. She felt them clinging to her back, the judgment, the pity, the amusement. The conference room was enormous, its walls floor-to-ceiling glass that framed the rain-drenched city beyond. A long polished table stretched across the room, lined with immaculate candidates. And at the far end of the room, standing apart from everyone else, was a man Anna recognized instantly, even though she had only ever seen him in grainy news clips and magazine covers. Gerald Bones, CEO of Bones Enterprises, the man who had turned a struggling family business into a billion-dollar empire. Ruthless, brilliant, untouchable. He stood with his hands clasped loosely behind his back, watching the room with a gaze so sharp it seemed to strip away pretense. And now it was locked onto her. Anna froze, every instinct screaming at her to run. She had no business being here. She was an embarrassment. A mistake. Gerald Bones's mouth moved slightly. She couldn't hear the words, but the effect was immediate. The woman beside him, an executive assistant, maybe, nodded and began speaking into a small microphone. "Thank you all for coming," she said. "The initial group interview is concluded. You may leave your resumes at the front desk." Confused glances ricocheted around the room. Chairs scraped back. Voices rose in protest. "But we just got here. I didn't even get to present." Anna stood rooted to the spot, her heart pounding so loudly she could barely hear the commotion. Gerald Bones didn't even glance at the other candidates. His gaze remained fixed on her. As the room emptied, Anna found herself alone in the cavernous space, dripping onto the pristine floor, facing a man whose empire could crush her without a second thought. He stepped forward, his movements precise, deliberate. "Miss Clenn," he said, his voice low and even. "Sit." She stumbled into the nearest chair, barely feeling it beneath her. Gerald took the seat across from her, folding his hands on the table. "Tell me," he said, tilting his head slightly, "why are you here?" Anna swallowed hard. Her throat felt raw, scraped clean by humiliation and fear. But somewhere beneath all that anger simmered. Anger at the world. At herself. At the unfairness of it all. "I'm here because I don't have anywhere else to go," she said, her voice hoarse but steady. "Because I'm tired of running. Because I need a chance." Gerald's face didn't change. He was impossibly still, like a sculpture carved from ice. "And you thought," he said slowly, "that showing up looking like you crawled out of a ditch would make a good impression?" A hot flush crawled up Anna's neck, but she lifted her chin. "No," she said. "But I figured showing up at all had to count for something." For a heartbeat, silence stretched between them, taut as a wire. Then, so subtle she almost missed it, one corner of Gerald's mouth quirked upward. "Maybe it does," he said. Before Anna could process that, he pushed back his chair and stood. "Come with me." Anna scrambled to her feet, nearly slipping on the slick floor. She grabbed her bag and followed Gerald Bones out of the conference room, her heart hammering so loudly it drowned out the sounds of the office around them. Every step she took felt surreal, like she was walking through a dream that might dissolve at any second. He moved with effortless authority, cutting a path through the maze of glass partitions and polished desks. People turned to stare as they passed, curiosity flickering in their eyes. Gerald didn't acknowledge any of them. They reached a private elevator. Gerald swiped a card and the doors opened with a soft chime. He gestured for her to enter first. Anna hesitated only a second before stepping inside. The doors slid closed, sealing them into a small, mirrored space. She caught sight of herself again, mud-streaked, disheveled, out of place, and fought the urge to look away. Gerald stood beside her, his reflection composed and unbothered, as if it were perfectly normal to escort a walking disaster into the inner sanctum of his empire. The elevator climbed swiftly, silently. "You're not what I expected," Gerald said, almost to himself. Anna wasn't sure how to respond. She settled for the truth. "Neither am I." A soft, almost imperceptible hum of amusement escaped him. When the doors opened, they revealed a world far removed from the chaos of the floors below. Gerald's office spanned nearly an entire floor, with panoramic views of the rain-drenched city. Sleek leather chairs, dark wood accents, and abstract art pieces filled the space with an understated elegance that spoke of quiet, relentless power. Gerald crossed to his desk, a minimalist structure of glass and steel, and picked up a slim file folder. He flipped it open and scanned the contents with practiced efficiency. "You have no degree," he said without looking up. "No corporate experience. No professional references." Anna's stomach twisted. She tightened her grip on the strap of her bag to stop her hands from trembling. "That's correct," she said. He closed the folder and set it down. "And yet," he said, meeting her gaze directly, "you're still here." Anna swallowed hard. "I don't quit," she said simply. Gerald studied her for a long moment. His expression was unreadable, carved from stone. Then he nodded once, as if confirming something to himself. "You'll start tomorrow," he said. Anna blinked. "Wait, what?" "Administrative support," he said, walking toward a smaller side office and flicking on the lights. "It's a trial. 60 days. If you can survive it, you stay. If you can't, you're out." She stared at him, unable to speak. He turned back to her, one brow raised slightly. "Problem, Miss Clenn?" She shook her head violently. No problem. Thank you. Thank you so much." He inclined his head once. "Don't thank me yet." The warning in his voice was clear. Anna didn't care. She would face whatever this place threw at her. She would prove herself, not just to him, but to everyone who had ever looked at her and seen nothing. She would not fail. The following morning, Anna arrived at Bones Enterprises an hour before the official start of the workday. She wore the cleanest outfit she owned, a plain black skirt, a white blouse that had seen better days, and the least worn pair of sneakers she could find. Her hair was tied back in a simple braid, and she had scrubbed every trace of mud and grime from her skin until it was raw. The security guard at the front desk looked at her badge skeptically before waving her through. Upstairs, the office was still waking up. The hum of computers booting up, the soft clatter of keyboards, the muted conversations over coffee cups, it was a symphony of ambition, and Anna was determined to learn every note. Her desk was a small, windowless cubicle tucked near Gerald's private suite. It was sparsely furnished, a basic computer, a landline phone, a single filing cabinet. A slim binder lay in the center of the desk, labeled simply, Orientation. Anna opened it and began to read. The expectations were clear. Ruthless efficiency. Absolute discretion. Zero tolerance for error. Her tasks would include managing Gerald's schedule, coordinating internal communications, preparing reports, and ensuring that no detail, no matter how small, slipped through the cracks. By the time Gerald arrived precisely at 8, Anna was already on her second pass through the orientation materials, taking furious notes. He barely glanced at her as he passed, a sleek figure of authority in a charcoal gray suit, but she noticed the brief flicker of acknowledgement in his eyes. It wasn't approval. Not yet. But it wasn't dismissal either. That was enough. The first week was brutal. Gerald Bones operated at a pace that made other executives look sluggish. Meetings were stacked back-to-back with military precision. Reports were expected on his desk before he even asked for them. Every email had to be crafted with the care of a legal contract. Every call had to be screened, prioritized, and followed up within minutes. Anna made mistakes. Of course she did. Her fingers stumbled over unfamiliar software. She missed a meeting location on her first day and had to sprint 2 blocks in the rain to correct it. She misfiled a confidential report and nearly had a panic attack when she realized her error. But she learned. Faster than anyone expected. By the end of the second week, Gerald had stopped micromanaging her every move. By the end of the third, he was handing her tasks with a few clipped words, trusting her to understand and execute without question. Other people noticed, too. Whispers started to circulate through the office, curiosity, resentment, disbelief. Who was the muddy girl who had walked into the interview like a disaster and somehow ended up at the right hand of Gerald Bones? Anna kept her head down and focused on the work. She didn't have the luxury of worrying about gossip. She was too busy surviving. Until the day everything started to shift. It was a Friday afternoon, the rain still pounding against the glass walls, when Gerald summoned her into his office without warning. Anna entered cautiously, notebook in hand. Gerald stood by the window, hands in his pockets, staring out at the storm. "You're not like the others," he said without turning around. Anna hesitated. "Sir?" He finally faced her, his expression thoughtful in a way she hadn't seen before. "You don't pretend," he said. "You don't play games. You don't waste time trying to impress." She opened her mouth, but no words came out. Gerald's gaze was steady, piercing. "That's rare," he said. "And valuable." Anna's heart pounded so loudly she was sure he could hear it. "Thank you, sir," she managed to say. A ghost of a smile touched his mouth, there and gone so fast she almost doubted it had ever been there. He picked up a file from his desk and handed it to her. "Review this over the weekend," he said. "Tell me Monday if you think it's worth pursuing." Anna took the file carefully, as if it were made of glass. "Yes, sir." As she turned to leave, his voice stopped her. "And Anna," she looked back at him. "You've earned this." The weekend passed in a blur of rain, coffee, and relentless study. Anna devoured the file Gerald had given her, reading it twice, then a third time, scribbling notes in the margins until her fingers cramped. It was a business proposal, sleek, polished, and, to anyone less desperate, tempting. But Anna saw the cracks. The numbers were too clean, the projections too optimistic. Beneath the glossy promises lurked risks that could sink even an empire as massive as Bones Enterprises. By Monday morning, she was nervous but prepared. When Gerald called her into his office, she presented her findings without hesitation, her voice clear and steady. He listened without interrupting, his expression giving away nothing. When she finished, he simply nodded. "Good," he said. "You caught it." Relief flooded her so swiftly she nearly sagged with it. But she forced herself to stay composed. "There's more," she said, emboldened by his silence. "I found another opportunity, a smaller firm, steady growth, undervalued assets. If you're looking for a safer investment with long-term potential. She slid a second folder across his desk. Gerald raised an eyebrow as he opened it. His eyes flicked over the first page, then the second. For a moment, the only sound in the room was the distant hum of rain against glass. When he finally looked up, something new glinted in his gaze. Interest. Respect. You did all this over the weekend? Anna nodded. He leaned back in his chair, regarding her with a measuring look. Remind me to double your workload, he said dryly. Anna couldn't help it, she smiled. A small, real smile that broke through the tension like sunlight. Something in Gerald's face softened just for a second. Dismissed, he said, but his tone was almost warm. As she left the office, her heart hammered in her chest, not with fear this time, but with something far more dangerous. Hope. Weeks blurred into a new rhythm. The storms that had once dominated the city skies faded into crisp, cold autumn mornings. Anna became an invisible, indispensable presence at Bones Enterprises, moving through the sharp-edged corporate world with quiet determination. The whispers about her didn't stop. If anything, they grew louder. She must have something on him, she heard one woman mutter near the elevators. Or she's sleeping with him, someone else snickered. Anna kept her head high and her focus sharp. She knew better than to fight gossip with words. She would let her work speak for itself. Still, the rumors gnawed at her in quiet moments. She wasn't blind. She saw the way people looked at her. A girl with no pedigree, no connections, no expensive degree. Occupying a space they thought belonged to someone else. And she saw the way Gerald looked at her, too. It wasn't inappropriate. Never once did he cross a line. But there was a weight to his gaze sometimes. A kind of silent acknowledgement that neither of them dared name. Terrified her. And thrilled her. One evening, long after most of the office had emptied, Anna was finishing up a report when Gerald's door opened. He didn't speak at first, just stood there, one hand resting lightly against the frame. You're still here, he said finally, his voice low. Anna shrugged. Work doesn't finish itself. He smiled. A real smile, brief and devastating. Come, he said. She hesitated. Where? He didn't answer, just turned and walked toward the private elevator. Against her better judgment, Anna followed. The city was crisp and alive with early autumn energy. Gerald led her a few blocks away to a small, unassuming restaurant tucked between towering office buildings. A place with worn leather booths and soft jazz playing in the background. It wasn't the kind of place she imagined a man like Gerald Bones frequenting. And yet he seemed perfectly at ease, ordering them both coffee without asking, waving away the waiter with a nod. For a while they didn't talk. The silence between them wasn't awkward. It was something else. Something fragile and tentative, like a bridge being built one plank at a time. Finally, Gerald spoke. I wasn't supposed to be there that day, he said, staring into his coffee cup. The interviews. I had a meeting across town. But the rain. It trapped me. Anna said nothing, sensing he wasn't finished. I was angry, he continued. Frustrated. Ready to cancel the whole thing. And then you walked in. He looked up, and his gaze was stripped of its usual armor. I don't believe in fate, he said quietly. But I believe in recognizing something when it stands in front of you. Anna's throat tightened. I'm not special, she whispered. A corner of his mouth lifted, sad and knowing. Neither am I, he said. The weight of the moment pressed down on them, so heavy Anna could barely breathe. She wanted to say something, anything. But before she could, Gerald's phone buzzed harshly on the table. He glanced at it, his jaw tightening. I have to go, he said, regret flashing across his face. Anna nodded, masking her disappointment. He stood, leaving a few bills on the table. Be careful, he said softly. And then he was gone, swallowed by the night. Anna sat there for a long time, staring into her cooling coffee, her heart a tangled mess of fear, hope, and something dangerously close to longing. She had promised herself she would survive. She hadn't promised herself she wouldn't fall. The following days were a delicate dance neither of them acknowledged. In public, Gerald remained the same, cold, commanding, untouchable. But behind closed doors, there were moments. Moments when their hands brushed as she handed him a report. Moments when their eyes met across the polished surface of his desk and neither looked away. Moments when silence said more than words ever could. Anna buried her feelings as deep as she could. She couldn't afford to hope. She had built too much, fought too hard to risk it all on a fantasy. But hope once sparked is not so easily extinguished. And neither was the connection growing between them, dangerous and undeniable, like a flame smoldering just beneath the surface. It was only a matter of time before it burned them both. It happened as these things often do when everything else was already teetering on the edge. A corporate gala, glittering, ruthless, essential. Bones Enterprises hosted it every year, inviting investors, partners, and power players to gather beneath the chandeliers and assess each other with thinly veiled ambition. Gerald insisted Anna attend. It wasn't phrased as an invitation. "You're my assistant," he said. "You're expected to be there." Anna wanted to protest. She had no gown, no expensive heels, no armor for an evening of scrutiny. But she knew better than to argue. 2 days before the gala, a black garment bag appeared at her desk, delivered without fanfare. No note. No explanation. Just a small, discreet tag stitched inside, a Clenn. Inside was a gown, deep navy satin, simple and devastatingly elegant, with a neckline that hinted at daring without crossing into vulgarity. Shoes followed the next morning, perfectly matched. Anna knew exactly who had sent them. She didn't dare ask why. The night of the gala, she stood outside the Grand Hotel, clutching a borrowed clutch bag and trying to calm the tremor in her hands. When she finally stepped inside, the world exploded into light and noise and glittering judgment. She found Gerald almost instantly. Or rather, he found her. He moved through the crowd like a blade, slicing through clusters of socialites and CEOs, his presence drawing a subtle shift in the room's energy. And when his eyes locked onto hers, when he crossed the marble floor without hesitation, the noise seemed to fall away entirely. "Miss Clenn," he said, his voice low enough that only she could hear. "Mr. Bones," she returned with a small, tight smile. For a moment, they simply stood there, two souls adrift in a sea of polished ambition. "You look..." He stopped himself, the word he didn't say hanging heavily between them. "Different. Stunning. Dangerous. Presentable," he finished dryly, offering his arm. Anna hesitated for a heartbeat before slipping her hand into the crook of his elbow. His body was warm, solid, comforting in a way that terrified her more than any boardroom or financial report ever could. The night unfolded in a haze of introductions and small talk. Gerald was the consummate host, polite, aloof, untouchable. Anna played her part perfectly, smiling when appropriate, deflecting invasive questions with practiced ease. But beneath the surface, tension coiled tighter with every glance, every accidental touch. And others noticed. She caught the glances, the whispered speculations, the way some women looked at her with amused pity, others with open hostility. The world Gerald Bones moved in was not kind to outsiders. She should have expected it when the ambush came. Near the end of the evening, as the crowd thinned and the alcohol loosened tongues, Anna found herself cornered near the ballroom doors by two women she vaguely recognized from company gossip. Daughters of board members, socialites who wore ambition like perfume. One of them, tall, blonde, predatory, smiled with faux sweetness. "So brave of you to come tonight," she said, voice dripping with condescension. "Not everyone would dare." Anna stiffened. "I'm just here to work." "Oh, of course," the second woman said, her laugh brittle and sharp. "Working your way up. We've all heard the story." He crawled up Anna's neck. She forced herself to smile tightly. "I'm not sure what you mean." The blonde leaned in, her breath heavy with wine. "Come on, dear. We all know how it works." Gerald's tastes have always been eclectic. He likes strays. Projects. Until he gets bored. Anna's hands curled into fists at her sides. Before she could respond, a shadow fell over the group. Gerald. He didn't speak. Didn't have to. His presence alone was enough to make both women blanch and stammer awkward goodbyes before fleeing into the crowd. Anna stared at the polished floor, humiliation burning her skin. "Don't listen to them," Gerald said quietly. She forced a brittle smile. "I'm fine." He reached out, the barest brush of his fingers against her wrist, and something in Anna cracked. "No, you're not," he said, and his voice was too raw, too real. The room blurred. The music, the laughter, the glittering chandeliers, all of it receded until there was only him, standing there with something like regret darkening his eyes. "Come with me," he said. And she did. He led her through a side exit into a quiet courtyard, the night air sharp against her overheated skin. For a moment, they just stood there, breathing, the distance between them charged and fragile. "You shouldn't have to endure that," he said finally. Anna wrapped her arms around herself. "It's not your fault." "Isn't it?" he asked bitterly. She shook her head. You gave me a chance. That's all I ever asked for. Silence stretched between them, taut and trembling. You deserve better, Gerald said, his voice rough. Better than whispers and backhanded compliments. Better than a life spent fighting to be seen. Anna laughed, a broken sound. Better isn't an option for people like me. He moved before she could react, closing the distance between them with 2 strides. His hand cupped her jaw, gentle but unyielding, forcing her to meet his gaze. You're wrong, he said fiercely. You're worth more than they will ever understand. The words shattered her. All the walls she had so carefully built, all the defenses she had armored herself with, they crumbled in the face of his conviction. Without thinking, without planning, Anna rose onto her toes and kissed him. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't neat. It was desperate and messy and utterly real. Gerald responded instantly, his hand sliding to the back of her neck, anchoring her to him as if afraid she might vanish. When they finally broke apart, breathless and stunned, Anna searched his face for regret, for hesitation. She found none. Only the reflection of everything she felt. Raw, overwhelming, terrifying. I shouldn't have done that, she whispered. Maybe not, Gerald said, brushing his thumb over her cheek. But I'm not sorry. Neither was she. Not yet. But the price for moments like these, for hope, for daring to reach for something more, was always higher than it first appeared. And the world they lived in had sharp teeth, waiting to tear them apart. The fallout was swift. By Monday morning, the whispers had evolved into outright speculation. Anna could feel the change in the air the second she stepped into the office. The glances that lingered a beat too long, the conversations that fell silent when she passed. She tried to focus. She buried herself in reports, schedules, anything that could anchor her to the normalcy she so desperately needed. But the walls were closing in. It wasn't long before Gerald called her into his office. The look on his face, grim, closed off, told her everything she needed to know before he even spoke. We have a problem, he said, tossing a thin folder onto the desk. Anna approached slowly, her stomach a tight knot of dread. She opened the folder and stared at the headline printed across the internal memo. Conflict of interest. Internal review initiated. She swayed slightly, gripping the edge of the desk to steady herself. They're investigating you, Gerald said, his voice clipped. Us. Because of... She couldn't finish the sentence. He nodded once. Anna closed her eyes briefly. I'll resign. No, he said sharply. I have to, she insisted. If I stay, they'll use it against you. Against the company. Gerald's jaw tightened. Let them try. You don't understand, she whispered. They'll destroy you. I can't be the reason for that. He rounded the desk in 2 strides, gripping her shoulders with a gentleness that belied the anger in his eyes. You are not a liability, he said fiercely. You are not a mistake. Tears burned her eyes, but she blinked them away. She had made it through worse. She would make it through this. I have to go, she said, her voice breaking. Gerald's hands tightened for a heartbeat before he released her, stepping back as if the distance might somehow protect them both. If that's what you need, he said quietly. It felt like dying. Anna packed her things in silence. She left her badge on the desk, her computer wiped clean, her heart a hollow wreckage inside her chest. She didn't say goodbye. She couldn't. The city swallowed her easily. She drifted through interviews and rejection emails, temporary gigs, and endless gray days that bled into each other without meaning. She told herself she was fine. She lied. Months passed. Winter bled into a reluctant spring, and with it came a fragile thawing of the numbness that had settled over her. Anna found work at a small consulting firm, nothing glamorous, but steady. Safe. She rebuilt herself brick by brick, day by day, until the cracks no longer yawned open at the slightest touch. But some nights, when the city was quiet and the world felt too big, she thought of Gerald, of his hand at her back, his voice low and certain in the dark, and wondered if she had left something behind she could never reclaim. And then, one rainy afternoon, everything changed again. Anna was leaving the office, her umbrella useless against the sideways sheets of rain, when she saw him. Gerald Bones? Standing across the street, his coat dark with rain, his hands shoved into his pockets, as if he had been standing there for a long time. Their eyes met. The world tilted. He crossed the street without hesitation, weaving through traffic like a man with nothing left to lose. Anna stood frozen, the rain soaking into her skin, her heart pounding so violently she thought it might break free from her chest. He stopped in front of her, close enough that she could see the rain clinging to his lashes, the exhaustion etched into his features. "Anna," he said, his voice rough. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. "I tried to stay away," he said, searching her face. "I thought it was the right thing, protecting you, letting you go." A shudder tore through her. "I didn't want you to protect me," she said, her voice shaking. "I wanted you to trust me, to fight for me." Pain flickered across his face. "I was a coward," he said simply. "I let fear dictate what should have been hope." Tears blurred her vision, hot and bitter and blinding. "I lost everything when you left," he said. "Not my company, not my reputation. You." The rain beat down around them, cold and relentless. Gerald reached out, his fingers brushing against hers. Tentative, asking. "I don't want safe," he said. "I want real. I want you." Anna's breath hitched. "I'm still a mess," she whispered. "So am I," he said, a raw smile breaking across his face. "Maybe that's why we fit." For a moment, they just stood there, two broken people in the middle of a relentless, uncaring city. And then Anna stepped forward, closing the distance between them, wrapping her arms around his neck as if anchoring herself to the only thing that made sense anymore. He caught her against him, holding her with a desperation that spoke louder than any words. They kissed, fierce, clumsy, perfect as the rain poured down around them, washing away everything that didn't matter. When they finally pulled apart, breathless and shivering, Gerald rested his forehead against hers. "Come home with me," he whispered. Anna closed her eyes, feeling the truth settle deep into her bones. She wasn't surviving anymore. She was living. And she wasn't doing it alone. Together, they turned and disappeared into the storm, ready to build something messy, beautiful, and entirely their own. Not because life had finally made it easy, but because they had finally chosen it and each other without fear.